Personal sovereignty. We need to become our own personal leaders and internal authorities, learning to trust ourselves and our own power in the process instead of giving it away to anyone else. Therein lies the development of true spiritual sovereignty. Many people have the need to follow some figurehead, be it a government personality, medical professional or spiritual guru. Individuals oftentimes get sucked into the celebrity matrix and latch onto authors and researchers they admire as well, blindly following what they say without doing their own fact-checking or listening to their bodily intuition. There is a big difference between getting inspired by people who put out work that resonates with us and from whom we can learn new points of view, and putting those same folks on a pedestal, living only by the content of what they publish without questioning it at all, and projecting absolute authority onto them, whether it's done consciously or not. The latter situation is how we wind up getting cut off from our own inner knowing intuition guidance system, the network which holds our personal truth that is unique to us, and which lights up our individual path and illuminates our life lessons. When we abdicate personal accountability to sovereign thought and deed, it puts us into a tunnel vision situation which actually disconnects us from our divine nature and innate wisdom. It is about simultaneously recognizing and honoring both our individuality and our interconnectedness, relating with others and striving for community but not getting lost in self-limiting group hive mind thinking. The members' firm belief in the inherent morality of their group and their use of undifferentiated negative stereotypes of opponents enable them to minimize decision conflicts between ethical values and expediency, especially when they are inclined to resort to violence. The shared belief that we are a wise and good group inclines them to use group concurrence as a major criterion to judge the morality as well as the efficacy of any policy under discussion. Since our group's objectives are good, the members feel any means we decide to use must be good. This shared assumption helps the members avoid feelings of shame or guilt about decisions that may violate their personal code of ethical behavior. Negative stereotypes of the enemy enhance their sense of moral righteousness as well as their pride in the lofty mission of the in-group. Irving L. Janis, victims of groupthink. Always think for yourself, never follow anyone blindly, and never fall into an unquestioning mindset, no matter how charismatic or wise your heroes may appear to be. Never give in to group and peer pressure if it contradicts your own experience, intuition, and research. Part of the problem is also that most of us yearn to belong, the instinctual tribal identification. So many of us look for a group, movement, political party, community, religious, spiritual collective to identify with and belong to. We are social creatures, after all, and that desire for bonding is natural and instinctual. It is also foundational to the structure of 3D existence. As Juliet Carter writes, the Mahagaya Tantra of creation differentiates from the monad in order to experience relationship. There is also nothing wrong with these kind of groups movements per se, and obviously we need to connect, network and create community in order to create an alternative to the isolation, distraction, division tactics of the parasitic elements which currently rule human interactions. However, if it's at the expense of personal sovereign identity, and groupthink overwhelms and replaces individual thought, creativity and expression, especially since everyone is very different and unique, an astrological human design birth chart can show these differences very well, then it actually becomes a reflection of the NWO's globalist agenda, which is to make everyone the same, even if it's more subtle and not by force alone. This is the disease of homogenization, the cookie-cutter, compliant consumerist virus. When all obsessive group consciousness on Earth is finished, exhausted, when it admits defeat, then a different era will emerge. But for now, we are in the middle of the collective experiment. High-flying cloying sentiment, profound dependence on others, covert repression, these are the order of the day. How long until the collective age is over? 100 years? 1,000 years? The answer is, as long as it takes for every human to realize that the experiment has failed, and why. The why is clear: the individual has been overlooked. He has been demeaned. He has been grabbed up and drafted into groups. His creative power has been compromised in order to fit in. The majority of the world still believes in this approach, as if from good groups will flow the ultimate and final solutions we have all been seeking. This is sheer mind control, because good groups morph into evil, and vice versa, in the ongoing stage play called reality. Ideals are twisted, infiltrators subvert plans, lessons are ignored, and the whole sorry mess repeats itself again. What constituted a triumph of good over evil at one moment is guided into yet another collective, whose aims are a better kind of control. The most deluded among us believe we are always on the cusp of a final breakthrough, but there is no we to make the breakthrough. It comes to every person on his own. And it does not arrive as the thrust of an external force, but from one's own struggle, accompanied by insights for which there is no outside agency to lend confirmation. John Rappaport, The Matrix revealed, the collective experiment on planet Earth. Another human trait is the drive to be loved and accepted. Many of us diminish ourselves, mostly unconsciously, in order to belong and be accepted by our chosen tribe. This can result in suppression of intuition and one's own inner knowing, one's own personal truth and voice in terms of what one's unique soul is here to do and learn. Under the strain of group peer pressure situations, we can lose or not trust in our personal inner guidance, simply because we don't want to be rejected and abandoned. This is also the basis of the thought processes for authoritarian followers in cult-like circumstances, including political party affiliation, grown adults who still need mom and or dad to tell them what to do, what to think, etc. It's a bit of a paradox, because on one hand, we all need to network, build community and connect with each other, but at the same time we need to be our own person and live our lives as individualized expressions of a unified conscious awareness. Sometimes we need guidance and feedback from others, since we all have our blind spots, but there are times where others project their shadow onto us, including shame and guilt-tripping, even under the disguise of, for the better good of us, and group peer pressure circumstances force us to either conform or break free from the tyranny of the majority. Oftentimes, these events also result in a "you are either with us or against us" attitude, prevalent amongst many militant groups and nations, when you are only supported as long as you are a part of the group movement and fully indoctrinated into their particular ideology. The unwillingness to be wrong, the inner belief that one's worldview is the only right worldview, the lack of self-examination of one's own ideology, and the inability to learn from those on the outside of one's group are sure signs of indoctrination. If a community doesn't encourage you to think for yourself and learn from those outside of that community, it prizes conformity far more than it does your own education and freedom of conscience. BTBD. There is also a hierarchy in groups movements that can result in hive mind thinking, where the opinions and proclamations of the founders leaders within these organizations are accepted without question as the truth, and the opinions of group members becomes just a parroted version of those who are higher up on the ladder. This ties also into the bandwagon fallacy, appeal to authority, Stockholm syndrome, political correctness, logical fallacies that are so prevalent in public discourse these days. The parental image, projected onto leaders and authority regimes, is part of this public relations programming package, where government is lauded as the ultimate exemplar of the collectively perceived daddy-mommy figure. No one is perfect, and ultimately, it's about sovereignty and autonomy, becoming fully realized individuals and seekers of truth while at the same time striving to connect with others. So, having healthy boundaries is an important part of this process, as well as establishing healthy self-love parameters. None of our ego personalities are without fault, and at times we swing between self-diminishment/low self-esteem and overinflated narcissistic tendencies. It's a continuing lesson for all of us, and constant vigilance is required. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Shakespeare, Hamlet. This is not an easy journey, because, as children, none of us were taught how to tap into our own inner guidance systems and trust our inner knowing intuition, and as a result of this disconnection we are all wounded and conditioned to varying degrees. In fact, most wounded people yearn to belong, to be a part of a group, or identify strongly with a nationalistic or spiritual identity. Sometimes, such desires result in outbreaks of unconscious trauma bonding, where belief in government or other external authoritarian constructs generates this unhealthy connection pathology on a macro level, the ultimate Stockholm syndrome. We are all traumatized, wounded, conditioned to varying degrees, and these psychological states serve to cut us off from our own inner knowing and inner guidance, and even disconnect us from basic critical thinking skills, hence why many people look for guidance outside of their own innate gifts, from someone whose perceived authority bestows them with the right to tell them what to do and what to think. People also are programmed to feel safer when there are others who follow in the same manner that they do, the herd pack mentality that has contributed to a great deal of suffering on the planet. The way I perceive the awakening concept is that it involves becoming a true individual, connected to one's higher self-intuition, a fully embodied sovereign being who contributes to humanity in whatever natural form this takes for each individual, based on his her talents lessons and, at the same time, remains a unique personality who can think for him herself. It's not a state of feeling constantly blissful, but rather it's about being grounded in this life, whatever the future may bring, understanding that there is a purpose to every existence, as we are engaged in the cosmic play of awakening within the evolutionary dance of individual and collective consciousness. As infants and children, we rely on our parents' elders as reference points for the actualization of our identity and understanding of reality. Due to this primal developmental mechanism, often found in the animal kingdom as well, people within a society often create hierarchical models through social roles as reference points to dictate personal behavior and identity. As above, so below, as internally, so externally, right? This is perfectly natural and, along the path of growth, serves as an adjunct stepping stone toward self-discovery. However, even as adults, due to humanity's largely unconscious condition reinforced by cultural programming, many people have yet to actualize true knowledgeable autonomy through critical thinking and dedicated holistic self-work. The social pressure to conform and belong, and subsequent fear of condemnation for dissension is a primary element which retards independent actualization and is the primary characteristic that differentiates dominance hierarchies from empowerment hierarchies, where exploration, empathic inquiry, and compassionate understanding are paramount. To the unconscious parts of our mind still rooted in childhood programming, confronting and abandoning the normalized beliefs of a perceived authority raises a deeply rooted fear of abandonment, exile, and death. We see this reinforced within more complex social institutions, religion, government, etc., where dissension has literally resulted in death. This largely unconscious psychological mechanism is often exploited, consciously or unconsciously, within dominance hierarchies to coerce conformity, assimilation, and submission through the manipulation of guilt and shame, often by sophism or shadow projections, as Jung espoused, or by creating social spectacles which instill fear using hostility, threats, and violence to reinforce the legitimate necessity of security in adhering to the collective groupthink authoritarianism. Google the Stanford Prison Experiment for a deeper look at what people are capable of through authoritarianism. In short, think for yourself. Question authority. Humberto Braga.